with you this afternoon in a fountain. It's amazing, as I said, driving around Sydney streets. I basically did the block, and I thought, Tim's going to call me in a minute, and sure enough, I get a call from Tim. You know, are you close? I said, yeah, it's all right, I'm close. Parked the car and did the dash down, but you just got to... My mind at the moment is filled with traffic and people and cars, and it's been one of those days. I've been out at New Hope Church this morning, in their new facility out at, I said to Tim, just this side of Melbourne, out at Windsor, and from racing from there back into here, and it's good to be with you again. I was here with you just when I came back from overseas in 2015, and that was a culture shock in itself. Coming back from Fiji and Solomons to live in this place. And every now and then, it comes back to be a shock. You go to church out in the islands and, you're on four-wheel drive tracks, you're going through rivers and creeks, over derelict bridges, and here you're dealing with something very different of traffic and cars and all sorts of things. But anyway, that's Sabbath. It's good to be here. If you have your Bibles there with you, I invite you to open them to the book of Revelation, chapter 5, and verse 9. And here we have a passage that reminds us of who Jesus is and his importance to us. Revelation 5, verse 9. The Bible says, "And they sang a new song, saying, 'You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seal. For you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood, out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God. And we shall reign on earth.'" Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we pause this afternoon to reflect on your word, to find encouragement, to find hope, and to find joy. Lord, it's our prayer as we bow our heads this afternoon that you will take the busyness of the week, the busyness of the day, and set it aside that we might hear your voice and find encouragement from it this afternoon, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. The sermon title for today is The Last 5 Minutes. And I want to begin by drawing your attention to a building not that far from here, called the SCG. I want you to imagine for a moment that every minute someone took a magic eyedropper and dropped one drop of water in the centre of the SCG. And that magic eyedropper, water, would double every minute. 1 drop, 2 drops, 4 drops, and so on. Listen to what would happen. And this is written by a man from the US. I've changed it to reflect our context. Chris Martinson, an economic researcher and futurist who was based in the US, said, "If at noon he took you to the top stand of the SCG and handcuffed you there, and then went down to the centre pitch and dropped that drop of water that doubled every minute. If the SCG was watertight, how long have you got?" He goes on to do the calculations. He says 1 drop becomes 2, becomes 4. By 12:44, 44 minutes after it has begun, there is simply 5 feet of water covering the entire field of the SCG, still leaving 93% of the stadium empty. And so it's at that point, handcuffed to the top, you're sitting back thinking, This is easy. Not a problem in the world. But just 5 minutes later, the entire stadium would be covered in water. For those of you that are mathematicians, it's the power of compounding geometric progression. Not something that we did in theology class at Avondale. For 44 minutes, we think we're safe. But in just 5 minutes, chaos erupts. He then goes on to say this. He says, Martinson warns that for centuries, global trends have appeared flatline. Slow incremental growth in Earth's population, oil consumption, water and food, national debt, personal debt. To outward appearances, the stadium had hardly any water in it. There was plenty of time left to extricate ourselves from that stadium. But as the researcher warns, in these opening years of this third millennium, Earth is facing a perfect storm. He says, with critical trends now simultaneously skyrocketing off the grass, hemorrhaging debt, oil and energy consumption depletion, scarcity of water, food combined with incredible mouths to feed, we thought we had time to get ready, but time is up. Martinson goes on to write, all it will take in this country, speaking of the US, is a crippling crisis, economic, a financial collapse, an ecological disaster, a political turmoil. I'll leave that one alone. Military disaster, one debilitating crisis, and this nation will be on its knees. Now, when we do a comparison between the US and Australia, our debt to GDP, or US GDP, is 104%. Want to take a guess at Australia? 120%. And so we look to the US and see their debilitating debt crisis, and yet in Australia, we're ahead of where the US is. Ian Bremmer goes on. He says, American political scientist specialising in, he is an American political scientist specialising in foreign policy. He states this: the international order in itself is unravelling. In the past 8 years alone, the world has seen the worst financial crisis in decades. Global recession, historic debt crisis in the Eurozone, a wave of unrest across North America and the Middle East, civil war in Syria, a migrant crisis that calls into question the future of European borders. And then the election of US President, one Donald Trump. He calls it a geopolitical creative destruction, or just the sounds of things falling apart, but the grinding of the G0 gears has become too loud to ignore. These are worldly commentators reflecting on the state of the world in which you and I live. Going back a little earlier than this, a little lady writing to the church made this observation. She says, this is a present time of overwhelming interest to all living. Rulers and statesmen, men who occupy positions of trust and authority, thinking men and women of all classes have their attention fixed on the events taking place around us. This is over 100 years ago. She's writing this. They're all watching the strained restlessness that exists among the nations. They observe the intensity that is taking place in every earthly element, and they recognise that something great and decisive is about to take place. The world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. Again, over 100 years ago. She finishes off by saying this: angels are now restraining the winds of strife, that they may not blow until the world shall be warned of the coming doom. but a storm is gathering, ready to burst upon the earth. And when God shall bid his angels loose the winds, there will be such a scene of strife as no pen can picture. Carol and I were just talking yesterday in the car about the crisis that the Bible talks of and that Ellen White here talks of. And as a boy growing up, and maybe as a girl growing up in the midst of Sydney, and maybe you too, we have this understanding of what that crisis will be like. Where we run off to the hills and we eat nut meat and feed off Weet-Bix. And maybe that's the time of crisis that we have in mind. And yet we look at tracking devices these days, we look at mobile phones, and where people can track you where you're going. My uncle went missing about 3 weeks ago now. I was in Tasmania. My dad rang me and said, we don't know where Ken is. And fortunately, he being 81, I had the task to set up his iPhone. And unbeknownst to him, I put on that iPhone, find a friend. And so a quick look on the phone, that's an odd place for him to be. And here he was, stuck out the back. He'd had a stroke. He had driven his car to an isolated location and got out of the car, spent the night in the bush, and here he was, lost in the bush. 2 hours later, after we called the police, we found him. And yet we look at this time of crisis and where technology is now. There's a crisis coming which we can't even begin to imagine. And Ellen White talks of this crisis. But when we look through Scripture, come across to the book of Matthew, we get a glimpse of the faith that exists in the world at this particular time. And this faith is talking about you and me. It's talking about my faith. It's talking about your faith. And Matthew chapter 24 gives us an insight into the conditions of the world at this particular time. Matthew 24, in verse 12, the Bible says, "And because of lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold." And so, at a time where the world is earthquakes and pestilences are continuing to increase, here we see, according to Jesus, that the love of many will grow cold. In fact, in talking the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says of the conditions of this world, will he find faith? That's the condition of the world prior to Jesus coming. Talking about a generation. You and I, whose faith is growing cold. And as I was reflecting on this, the question comes to mind, how are you and I to live in these last 5 minutes? Because you and I, we go on, in a sense, we're captivated in and captured in this business as usual. And coming back to live in Australia, it was one of those things again that just hit me fair and square in the eyes. We have people, we go around our daily business. And one of the hardest things I've had to adjust with in coming back to Australia was coming back into a 9 to 5 job. You know, it wasn't the typical pastor's job, Tim. You know, the office opens at 8:15 with worship. You go through the day, you have lunch. 5 o'clock comes, it's knock-off time. You go walk home or drive home. You do things at home, and you've got a routine there. And then, what happens the next day? Week after week after week. That's the life that you and I exist in. And then we get to church on Sabbath, and what happens at church? Welcome, prayer, song service, children's story, sermon, final hymn, shake the hands of the pastor at the door, and go home for the week. Routine. There has to be more than being on that bus. And so in these last 5 minutes, where the world, the cogs of the world are grinding to an end, how are you and I to live? That's the question. When the love of many is growing cold, when Jesus says, will he find faith? How are you and I going to live in these last 5 minutes? Revelation gives us a key, and come back with me to the book of Revelation once again. Because we see in this chapter a story and a glimpse of how you and I are to live in these last 5 minutes. Picking up at verse 1 of chapter 5. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written on inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice. And it's interesting, you go through the book of Revelation and find out reference to those loud voices that are mentioned throughout the book of Revelation. It's a fascinating study. This angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals? And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. Not a one. The universe is in crisis. And a key time when someone needs to open this scroll, no one. And because of that, we see John's reaction. Verse 4. So I wept. Just reflect on that for a moment. Of John's urgency. Of John's desire for someone to show up and open that scroll. Someone's got to do it. He was eager to see what was inside it, to understand. No one on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it, and so I wept much. As we look in the Greek, this wasn't just a casual tear that was being wept at. Oh well, can't open the scroll. This was John weeping uncontrollably. The Greek gives us, I wept and continued to weep because no one could open that scroll. That was his reaction. He was hungry to know what was inside it. And so I wept much because no one was found worthy to open the scroll and to read it to me or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, do not weep. Behold, the Lion from the tribe of Judah, from the root of David. The only time in the New Testament these two phrases are mentioned together. Has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its seals. And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as though it had been slain. One of the things that, in one of my former roles when I was living in Tasmania, I was a sheep farmer. And one of the things that qualified me as a sheep farmer was that I owned sheep. I had 2. But at the end of that year, I had 7. So I figured I was a pretty good farmer. These lamb, I went up one morning to see them, and it was a Sabbath morning. I was preaching up at Launceston on that particular day, and I walked into the little corral where the ewe gave birth overnight. Here were 3 little lambs that had been born. For those of you that know your lambs, Suffolk sheep. Black legs, black head, beautiful. But these lambs were totally helpless. And as I see this particular passage, there in the midst of the throne room stood a lamb as though it had been slain. The lamb stood with the markings of being slain. Having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits God sent out into all the world. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. No one was worthy to take that scroll except that lamb. What qualified the lamb to take it? The markings of being slain. And so he reached forward to take that scroll on its own authority. John, in other parts of Revelation, is invited to take the scroll. But in this instance, Jesus reaches forward to take the scroll from the one who is on the throne. This lamb, looking as though it had been slain, was standing. He was standing victoriously. How did he gain that victory? He gained it having been slain. It tells us how he won that victory. Verse 8 goes on to say, and when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having a harp and a golden bowl full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song. Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain. Revelation 13 gives us a glimpse. You were slain from the foundations of the earth, before the foundations of the earth. And having redeemed us to God by your blood, out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on earth. Friends, as I read that particular passage, the whole universe was focused on the Lamb. There was not one eye that was not on that Lamb at that particular time. That Lamb that was worthy to take the scroll. The universe centered and focused on that Lamb. And it gives us a glimpse of where and how you and I are to live in these last days. It's living, not being diverted to focus on other things, but to live with our eyes fixed upon Jesus. Nowhere else. And in the distractions that you and I have, which are many, I'm reminded through that passage that we are to look nowhere else but to the Lamb. And John, on 28 occasions, reminds us of that Lamb throughout the book of Revelation. When he first saw the Lamb, or John the Baptist saw the Lamb in the book of John, how is recorded, behold the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. John the Baptist had fixed his eyes upon that Lamb. This is the one. And as you and I are living today in a world that is looking here, there, and everywhere, in these 5 minutes, we are reminded once again to look to the Lamb. To the Lamb that was slain from the foundations of the earth. That's where we look. Praise and adoration was then given, echoing out of Revelation chapter 4. Now in chapter 5, you are worthy. Verse 11 goes on to say, then I looked and heard a voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, and numbers of them. It was 10,000 times 10,000s and thousands and thousands, saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honour and glory and blessings. And every creature which is in heaven and on earth and under earth, and as such that is in the sea that is in them, behold, I heard them saying, blessings and honour and glory and power be unto him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. The universe resounded with this sevenfold blessing of the Lamb. And once again, in these 5 minutes, that's where you and I look. It's not complicated. Jesus simply says, whoever calls out on my name will be saved. And when we come to church, that's what you and I celebrate. We celebrate the goodness, the grace, the mercy of Jesus Christ. Ellen White says heaven was bankrupt when he came to earth. That's where you and I look. Book of Hebrews, just in closing. Chapter 12 gives us another glimpse of this. It was the year 2000, the Sydney Olympics were on, and we thought we would just simply, how often does it come to Sydney? So we came to Sydney for the final marathon. We were in the stadium when the runners started to come in, and an Aussie was leading the charge at the particular point, leading the race. And as she came in through the stadium, this was for the women's walk, as they came in through the stadium, just as she was about to enter, the crowd was fixated upon her coming in through the entryway into the stadium. And Aussie's leading. The big screens had pictures of her all the way through. And we were fixed upon this lady that was about to take the gold. And as she came in, she was given another card, a flag. That was her third warning, disqualified. You could hear the disappointment echo around the stadium. All of our eyes were just, and our hopes and our dreams of an Aussie taking gold were dashed. The book of Hebrews says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which so easily snares us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking. Again, Baron, help me out here. The Greek gives us this glimpse. It's not a casual glaze or gaze into looking into this. It's a fixated gaze upon Jesus. Not looking to the left, nor right, but fixating the eyes upon Jesus. That is how we run. The universe gives testimony to that, and now Paul again reinforces that. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, whom for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God, victorious. And so you and I look to that victor. In these 5 minutes that are here before us, we look to that victor. And as Bremer put it, the international world is unraveling, and the world is looking for solutions. We have those solutions. To share, to talk, to live. We have those solutions. So friends, in these 5 minutes, don't look to the world that is seeking solutions. Don't look to history. Don't look to the news of the way of unbelievers may want to see. Revelation gives us that glimpse. We look to the Lamb. the Lamb that was slain from the foundation of the world. That's where we look. And continue to look until Jesus breaks through those clouds in the eastern sky. We say, "Lo, this is he who we have waited for." And Jesus says to us, "Come into my rest." Friends, in the 5 minutes we have, where are you looking? What is consuming the life, your day-to-day living? Are we like the universe that just continues to gaze upon him who has given life, who is offering it to us? Or are we looking to everywhere but the crucified, buried, and risen Saviour? My friends, this week, no matter what you're battling with, that's where we look, to the risen Jesus.